So now let's talk about different agents of socialization. What does that mean, agents of socialization? It just means that there are different things in the world that socialize us to act a certain way and have certain beliefs and have certain philosophies of life. So, for example, the media actually is one agent of socialization, and the media influenced me specifically to exercise. I believe that you should exercise. Now, why do I believe that? Because I grew up when I was a little kid, I would watch wrestling with Hulk Hogan, and I would watch Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I would watch The Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and all of his movies, Commando. And then I would watch all the movies with Sylvester Stallone. And all of these guys had muscles. So to me, I believed that the media taught me I should be working out. Here's Marilyn Monroe. Now, Marilyn Monroe dyed her hair blonde. She's not a blonde. Her hair is very brown. But in the 1950s, she dyed her hair blonde, and so all the women in the 1950s started to dye their hair to look just like Marilyn Monroe. And if you look at her figure, she had a full figure. Today's actresses can't have the figure like Marilyn Monroe. They have to be much thinner. So the media influences what we think we should look like. There's me. I thought I would look like that. I need to put a new picture. That's old. All right, let's move on. Now let's talk about social class. Now, the social class that you belong to will influence your behavior and how you should act and behave. Certain social classes believe that, hey, you should obey authority. You should do exactly what they tell you to do. The other social class believes, hey, you're not a robot. You should challenge authority. Who do you think is told you need to obey? Is it the very rich or the very poor? And who do you think is told, hey, you should stand up for yourself? You're not a robot. Is it the rich or the poor? That's an interesting question. The answer is the poor are usually told you better do what they tell you to do. And usually the rich are told, hey, you're not a robot, you better speak up. Now, of course, the rich have more resources. The poor have fewer resources. That's why they're told you better do exactly as you are told. And my grandparents adopted me, and they were poor and had humble beginnings, and they always told me you better do exactly what they tell you to do. Now, daycares. Many people have gone to daycares, and the question is, who has a better vocabulary? Those that are homeschooled or those that go to a daycare? And who is more hostile? Those that are homeschooled or those that are in a daycare? And the answer is, for those of you that have been to daycare, what do you think? Can you remember daycare? Do you have any memories? Was it like a school? The ones that went to daycare did have a better vocabulary than those that were homeschooled, just because there's more stimulation, there's more children. Who is more hostile? For those of you that have been to daycare, you know a daycare can be very hostile. There's a lot of kids, and somebody's going to bite you, and somebody's going to punch you, and somebody's going to want your toy. So daycares are more hostile. We're going to create a flow chart. So let's say that this is your paper, right? On your paper, I want you to write the word right here in the middle and leave room, because we're going to go down like this, and then we're going to come up on the sides, much like an anchor. Now, one of the things that we all go through is called anticipatory socialization. and that's learning to play a role before you enter it. Now, all of you are in this process of, for example, if you're a senior or when you were a senior, you had to think, well, where do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to college? If I do want to go to college, which is the best one for me? And which is the best job for me? Which would be the best career for me? Who would be the best person for me to marry? What happens is we try our best to anticipate something before we enter it. And that's called anticipatory socialization. Some of us are very, very good at it. Others are not so good at it. And some people don't even practice anticipatory socialization. The next part is resocialization. In our lives, we're actually always going through the process of learning. Existing roles are replaced. So, we go from junior high to high school, and then we go from going from high school into college, and then from college into the workforce. We are always going through this process of being re-socialized. It happens again and again and again. It never actually stops. So we're always going through re-socialized, from being single to being married, from being married to being divorced, from living at home to living on your own. And then we all have to go through what is called a rite of passage. A rite of passage is a ceremony marking the change of roles. A rite of passage could be like, hey, getting your driver's license. That's a rite of passage. Everyone has to go through it. Moving out of the house is a rite of passage. Going away to college is a rite of passage. Let's say that you're hired on a police force. You're going to have to do the overnight shift, the late shift. That's a rite of passage. Everybody has to do it. You're the new person, and guess what? You're going to be doing the midnight shift. It's a rite of passage. Now, there are positive rites of passage, like a bar mitzvah for the Jewish people, a quinceañera. And then there are negative rites of passage. What would be a negative rites of passage? If you were going to join a gang and they said, well, you got to shave your head, you got to get a Nazi tattoo in this gang, that is the rite of passage. Here is a picture of a tribe, and he's putting his hand in a glove, and in that glove are a bunch of ants. His rite of passage from boyhood to manhood is for his hand to get bitten over and over again. Sociologists love to study rites of passage. Here's another rite of passage, and this is from the island of Samoa. And if you look at the legs here, these are legs of females. This is called a malu. It's a tattoo. It's a rite of passage for Samoan females. And if you look at the marks, this is the back of the knee. And if you notice, the heavy ink is done right where the sensitive part of the knee is. Now, these are the females. Now, the males receive inking that is much darker and much heavier. So here's another example of a rite of passage. Quick story. So there's a millionaire, Harris, and this is her, Patty Hearst. And this is her great-grandfather and her grandfather, and they were both millionaires. So she was going to inherit millions of dollars. Now, she was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, and they were like anti-government. This is in black letters. Again, you don't have to write this down. And I'm just telling you a story before we get to the definition, but she was kidnapped. Now, what happened is she was kidnapped, and they brainwashed her, and this is her with a machine gun. They were anti-American, and she adopted their beliefs, and here she is robbing a bank with a machine gun. So she went from being just a normal person that's going to inherit money and an average citizen to being anti-American. This is her right here. This is when she was arrested, and this is her mugshot. She was on magazines, The Saga of Patty Hearst. Here she is with a machine gun. What happens is we can go through social identity theory and we put people into categories and prefer our group. She was re-socialized. She went from thinking relatively normal to thinking atypically abnormal, if you will. And she went through social identity theory. We put people into categories, and of course we prefer our group. And she was with that people that were anti-American, and she believed, she picked up on their beliefs. And that was done to, of course, this was done subliminally, or should I say a better word is unconsciously. She didn't purposely want to do that, but her brain was picking up on those beliefs, and the brain does that to self-preserve itself. Now, if we look at different groups of, these are Mexican prisoners, and even though they're Mexican, they put themselves into different categories. For example, here's the La M for the Mexican Mafia. That's one group of Mexicans. These are Mexicans born in California. Not to be confused with the Norteños or La Familia. These are Mexicans born in Mexico. And then there's another group, the Texas Syndicate. These are Mexicans, but they're from Texas. So you see, even though that these three groups, yes, they're all Mexican, that is true. People tend to put themselves into categories. Mexicans from California, Mexicans from Mexico, Mexicans from Texas. Finally, let's talk about a total institution. This is where you're taken to a place and your identity is restructured. This is where you are cut off from the rest of society. Where could you be cut off to be completely resocialized? Examples of places where you could be completely resocialized might be a prison, right? You're cut off from society. A convent. Maybe a boot camp where you're resocialized to be a soldier. The convent is where you're resocialized to be a nun. Maybe a concentration camp like World War II, where they remove your self-esteem and your identity. Or maybe a rehab. You're cut off from society and they try to remove you off of drugs. Or maybe they get you to rethink about the way you think about food. So all of these are examples of a total institution where you are completely resocialized to get you to think a brand new way.